Day 3 is all about finding zeros of a function and then creating a function from those zeros. So this might look familiar from Algebra 2. So what zeros are they're basically your x-intercepts, and we know how to find our x-intercepts by taking our function and setting it equal to 0. So whenever it says find the zeros of the function, what it's really saying is find the x-intercepts. So in my first example, I have f of x equals x cubed plus 3x squared minus x minus 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that whole function and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So it's x cubed plus 3x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. So whenever you have four or more terms, you have to factor by grouping. So here I'm going to pull out an x squared from my first two terms, and I'm left with x plus 3. Remember, for factor by grouping, I need to end up with x plus 3 in parentheses for my second two terms. So what I would do is I would pull out a negative 1 to get negative x minus 3. So now that I have the parentheses the same, factor by grouping, I have x squared minus 1 times x plus 3. Now, since it's factored, I can set each equal to 0 or tee it up, which means that x squared equals 1, or x equals plus or minus 1, because when you take the square root of 1, you're just left with 1. And then x equals negative 3. That means that these zeros are negative 3, negative 1, and 1. And that's all you have to do when it asks you to find zeros. So all you do is set it equal to 0, factor, and then label what your zeros are. So let's try another one. Second example says find all zeros of the function f of x equals negative x to the fourth plus 4x cubed minus 4x squared. So again, since it says zeros, I'm going to set the whole thing equal to 0. So it's going to be negative x4 plus 4x cubed minus 4x squared equals 0. So since I have three terms and it goes x to the fourth to x to the third to x squared, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out a GCF. So I'm going to take out a GCF of negative x squared, so my leading term is going to be positive. So I'm going to be left with x squared minus 4x plus 4. So now I can factor what's in parentheses. So two numbers that multiply to 4 but add up to negative 4 are negative 2 and negative 2. So since I factor this, now I have to set each component equal to 0. So this is going to be negative x squared equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, and then x minus 2 equals 0. So in this first one I get x equals 0, second one I get x equals 2, and then third one I get x equals 2. So it's okay if you have more than one factor, and we're going to go over what that means in the next video. But your zeros are 0 and 2. So just to recap, in order to find the zero of a function, all you have to do is set it equal to 0, just like you would when you're finding your x-intercepts. So part 2 of today is, what if we know the zeros, but then we want to find the function that goes along with it? So in this first example, we're going to work backwards. It says, find the equation of a function with zeros negative 2, 1, and 3. That means I have x equal to negative 2, I have x equal to 1, and x equal to 3. So that's what we had at the bottom. Now we're going to go the other way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 to the other side, so I have x plus 2 equals 0. So that becomes one of my factors. Same thing here. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides, so I get x minus 1 equals 0. And here I'm going to get x minus 3 equals 0. So now what I do is I multiply those three factors. So x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. So what we have to do now is we have to expand this. So FOIL here. X times x is x squared. Then I have x times negative 1, which is just x. 2 times x is 2x. and then this is going to be minus 2. So I'm going to simplify that part first. So it's x squared plus x minus 2 times x minus 3. So then I have to distribute again. So x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 3 is negative 3x squared. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2. And then negative 2 times negative 3 is 6. Lastly, you just have to combine your like terms. So you get x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6. So in order to create a function, given those zeros, remember you set each one of those zeros equal to x and then move it over so that whole side equals 0, and all you have to do is multiply it. So if you want to try more practice with that, you can freeze the video right now, try the next example, or you can try the one after that as well. So those are two good practice problems if you need more help on that, and there's the answers right there for you. I want to go on to this last example, just because it has radicals in it. So it says find the function with the following zeros. So I know what I have to do is I have to set each one of those equal to x. So I have x equals 3. And from above we saw that all you have to do is subtract 3 over and we get this. So I know that's one factor. Now I have x equals 2 plus radical 11. So I'm going to subtract it on the other side. So I get x minus 2 minus radical 11 equals 0. Last one was x equals 2 minus radical 11. So it's going to be x minus 2 plus radical 11 equals 0. So those are my three factors, and what I'm going to do is now I'm going to multiply them. So I have f of x equals x minus 3 times x minus 2 minus radical 11, and then x minus 2 plus radical 11. So I want you to take a look especially at the radicals. So this is going to be a little bit tricky to see. But if I put parentheses around x minus 2 in both one, this becomes dots. So I have x minus 2 in both my x spots, and then I have negative times a positive. So because it's the same expression, but it's negative and a positive, that's a dots problem. So recall dots where in order to solve this, we do x minus 2 squared, and then we do subtract radical 11 squared. So the most important thing to remember is that whenever you have a radical, remember that there's a dots in there. So now let's expand this. So x minus 2 squared is going to be x squared minus 4x plus 4. So that's just foiling. Now radical 11 squared is just radical 11, so I'm going to subtract 11 at the end. So I'm going to combine before I multiply it by x minus 3. So I get x squared minus 4x minus, this should be 2 not 4, minus 9. So now what I can do is I can distribute here. So it's going to be x cubed minus 4x squared minus 9x minus 3x squared plus 12x plus 27. And then I'm going to combine my like terms. So I get x cubed minus 7x squared plus 3x plus 27. And that would be my function now. So like I said, whenever you notice there's a radical, I want you to look for dots, okay? All the time when there's a radical, there's gonna be a dot situation put into it. So for the rest of this, I want you to try the practice, and that's your homework for tonight or whenever you are choosing to do it. And then once you submit it, you can continue on.